One of the highlights of this year's Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a film called Scars Unseen. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the music composer for the film, Jacquie Joy. Jacquie, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you so much, Peter. Lovely to be here.
This is such an insightful documentary as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival about domestic violence and what is referred to as the shadow pandemic. How did you get involved in composing the music for the film?
I had met Meredith in 2019. I was working with a female composer group, and we composed some music and did some sound for one of her earlier documentaries, Story in Her Eyes, which was actually a prequel, similar sort of theme to Scars Unseen. We sort of kept in touch, and she reached out again a couple of years ago and said, would you be interested in working on Scars? So that's how I got involved initially.
Okay. It's such in some respects, a harrowing documentary about the impact that domestic violence has and that the scars are not seen because it's largely psychological and so on. So, what were the challenges for you in finding the right music for the film?
Just getting the right tone, the right flow for the film, and not having it too heavy. I wanted it in a way to be light and beautiful and to reflect the women's voices. The challenges were just to get the right sounds. Meredith and I worked closely together in order to do that. Initially, when I started out, I just did up two demo tracks. One was called Women's Piano Theme, and then there was a Women's Voice Theme. I spent a lot of time just trying to get the right sounds in order to soften and to also give the documentary a little bit of heart and beauty at the same time, because there was some very, as you say, harrowing and tough subjects and stories they were talking about. I suppose the trick was to be able to complement that without making it feel too heavy. We decided to have an approach for the three separate women just to give them a bit of personality through the music as well.
Right.
So it wasn't more of a challenge, it was a bit of a journey, and Meredith and I did that together.
Okay. Yes, I was going to ask you about that. So Meredith gave you some assistance with it all in terms of the sort of music she wanted.
Yes, she had a few ideas, for example, with Maha, using sort of Tibetan bowls, and her focus was a lot on yoga. So she gave me some of the sound that was the location sound that was recorded when she was doing her yoga classes. So said if you could use some Tibetan bowls, and for the percussion, you don't want to be using drums and cymbals as such. So we used some kalimbas and sanzula type healing thumb pianos for the percussion in Maha's area. We developed the Maha section first. Then I actually brought on Sandrine Rudar, who is a composer from the US, and she helped me with Trisha's section. So for Trisha's section, we brought on Angel's voices, and she sort of had a different feel. She's a beautiful pianist, which was lovely.
Yes.
I
I'm
don't know
all,
if I answered your question there, so
No, you have, because it's always so interesting about the process of putting music into a film and making decisions about how much and what intensity and how the music reflects what we see on screen. That is always a
yeah.
difficult process.
We had sort of five different things like moods, I suppose. You've got underscore, you've got storytelling, you've got ominous, you've got slightly darker. We didn't lean in on the dark a lot because what they were talking about made it dark enough, really,
Mm.
in certain sections. So we sort of had just some ideas of the different moods we wanted to create. So Meredith would she gave us a spreadsheet. I love working with female directors. They're always collaborative and will give you feedback or ideas. It always becomes so much better. We would say, oh, for this section, she'd say, I'd like a little bit of an ominous piece here. Also, there was a couple of sections that were silent. So just as important as music. There's a lot of music through it, but there was also some use of silence in a few areas as well. We just worked through it like that. It had to have a certain flow. I'd done a few documentaries before, so at the beginning of the process, when Meredith reached out, I showed her a documentary I'd done. I'd done sound for it as well, and just said, this is the style that could work. Music throughout that just follows the story, that sits in the background. So the audience shouldn't be fully aware of the music. They need to listen to these voices, but just showing how things could flow and keep the audience interested. I mean, it's 70 minutes long, so you've got to just keep pace. It slows down, speeds up, just subtly in the background. And also just giving the audience an idea of how to feel or to lighten the mood. With between the girls, you would have or the women, you would have noticed the waves. And Meredith wanted to use the sound of waves and the vision of waves just to reflect the cycle of trauma, which Adrienne talks about in her section, but also as a palate cleanse, just to give even the audience a little bit of a break to take in this information.
Yes.
We also discussed the use of sound and what the use of sound and sound design was minimal. So that's where the music was able just to lift and create that underbed or underbelly for the women. So we didn't use a lot of sound, but it was just important for my work on the sound to get the voices very audible and clear and present. So that I didn't have to do a lot of work on the sound design as much. The focus was definitely on the music.
Sure.
But it was an interesting process, just getting that balance right.
Absolutely.
You don't want to notice the music, but you've got to experience it or help it just complement the story. And each different woman had a bit of a personality. We had two main themes too that kept coming back: the women's voice theme and the women's piano theme. And that they were the two things I wrote before I even saw the cut of the film. Because I mean, when you first work with someone, I had worked with Meredith before and we'd had a great relationship. It's like matchmaking, filmmaking, and getting the right composer for the filmmaker. So yeah, and she placed those two themes before I'd seen the rough cut. She said, oh, here's the rough cut, and by the way, I've placed your music throughout as temp of these two themes. And I got it back and I was blown away. She'd placed it beautifully. And I'm going, well, this is meant to be. Because sometimes you're not the right composer for a film. It's so personal, especially for this one. So I never go into a project going, yes, I'll take it, let's sign it. It's more like, okay, well, I have a think about it. And this is what might work for you. What do you think? And she placed it all beautifully. So I knew from that point onwards, and she knew too that, yeah, this is a good match.
Oh, that is great
and
to
I knew
hear.
Sandrine would be a good match too, because she'd worked on the story previously as well. Also, I got a third composer in, Luna Pan from Sydney, and she helped us with a bit of extra piano music at the end as well, just to give enough variety. I was on a couple of other projects at the time, and I thought, well, let's get another woman in and just have her she did a couple of little pieces, and I sprinkled them in as well with Sandrine's and my music. So it just sort of gave it a bit of freshness and variety throughout. It didn't get boring.
No, it certainly didn't get boring, and the music is so good. And I'm just intrigued. You must have watched the film a number of times, and I wonder, obviously, to put the music in, to compose the music, but it must have had quite an impact, perhaps, having to watch these three women's stories, which are so harrowing. I don't know. What did it have any impact on you?
It did. It actually made me want to be in this area, being a part of telling women's stories like this. It's something I haven't had an insight to before, and I felt I just learnt so much from listening to these women, and I was so inspired, and I thought I was just honoured to be able to be a part of this whole film and to be able to help them tell their stories. I did have a big impact, and to the point where I'm actually pivoting my whole career to try and be in this area where I want to help women give their voices, even in song as well. I've actually pivoted to do production music, where I want to do songs where women are able to tell their stories through voice. And that is where I'm pivoting to as a composer, because I just feel like these stories need to be told, and it helps just give people an understanding of what goes on behind closed doors. And these women were so brave to talk out, and Meredith actually gave them made them feel comfortable enough to, it must have been incredibly hard, as you did see in the documentary, for them to actually articulate what has happened to them. Makes me shake. So it did have a big impact on me. And I'm just so honored to be a part of it, and I learned a lot from it as well. I'm just so happy that so many people around the world are seeing this and being inspired by these women as well. Each of them are so incredibly strong to have gone through all of that, to tell people about it, and then to become empowered by it and help other women and other men as well.
Yes.
The world becomes a better place, and people become happier. I love that. It did have a big impact on me.
Sure. No, I do understand. So, Jacquie, tell me, what was it that inspired you to become a film composer in the first place?
Well, I was a live singer and sang live and played guitar. Then I went into Expedia type world music and was writing, composing like that. And then I never thought I wanted to be a film composer, but when I finished up with that, I thought I want to do something different. And people just said, you should film compose. So it actually wasn't my decision. People around me said, why don't you go and compose for a film? I think you'd be good at it. So I somehow stumbled into it. And I'm glad I did. Telling people's stories with music and being part of this amazing whole area, it's just opened my eyes, and I seem to be able to look at a vision and actually match music to it somehow. I don't know, it seems to be a good match for me and I'm loving it. I stumbled into it.
Okay. Well done. It's quite an art, and you've obviously done well with it. What are some of the other films you've mentioned that you've been involved with?
Probably most recently in Australia, there was a film called Double or Nothing. That's like a crime comedy film. I'm involved with some TV shows, music placement on TV shows like Bondi Rescue and the Great Australian Bake Off. And so I've got a variety of things I can do. And I've done a lot of independent films, mainly independent films. So probably probably 50 to 100 now, well over 50 maybe. I don't know, I've lost count, doing sound and vision on indie films. Actually, in Peace Pilot, I just did a documentary that went onto Apple TV. That was more like world documentary music, where Robert De Laurentiis, a pilot in the US, did a round the world global expedition trip in a single pilot aeroplane and traveled around the world. So I was able to write some nice world music for that. And it was beautifully shot. That's another one that you can find online on Amazon. What I'd like to do now, I've actually just paused. I've just finished an action movie and I'm pausing, and I want to move forward with doing this style of composition. So I've actually just gone, okay, now I'm going to seek out and network with people to be able to write on this particular type of documentary moving forward.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You have quite an extensive filmography. What's the action movie you're involved with?
It is called Land of Wolves. It reminds me of Dallas and the Texas millionaires and doing underhanded things to safety concerns with the oil rigs. It's done by a San Diego-based filmmaker who has beautiful cinematography. So that was the one I just completed. So I think that will be released fairly soon, sort of locally there in theatres, and he'll release it online. A lot of fun. Actually, the title theme sounds a bit like Dallas with all the horns and but I had a lot of fun doing that. A lot of action scenes and people chasing people and kidnapping and gun shooting. And so I do like that as well. Seem to be quite good at that, because in those sort of genres, horror and action, I love how you get the cut of the film and people are talking and they're running around, but it doesn't really get too involved. And as soon as you add the music, it's suddenly your adrenaline's pumping, you're drawn into the screen, and it just makes such a difference at it. It's like magic. I love doing that. So I do like a bit of bold thrillers, action sort of style films as well.
Right.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Yeah, well done on that. Tell me, Jacquie, are there any particular film composers that you might look up to or have inspired you or whatever?
Well, actually, for this film too, Trent Resner and Atticus Ross. I love their sort of hybrid electronic work. And that's actually one of the, when we did a little, I usually do up a Spotify playlist at the beginning of a film just to say, oh, these are the sort of composers we're looking at to use for this film. And that they were a couple of the tracks were from Trent and Atticus. I tend to, they're modern sort of sounds. I love the sounds they use and how they weave it all together. So definitely those two. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think the Shape of Water guy, Alexander. I
Oh,
always say his name wrong. Desplat.
Desplat, yeah.
Love very Australian, Alexander Desplat. Love his work too on Avatar. It's John Johansson. Yeah, so
Yeah,
certainly, and of course Hans Zimmer for the action stuff. He's very much
sure.
all the ostinatos. Yes.
Okay. No, that's fine. It's interesting how this sort of area tends to be male dominated, and so having women as film composers is so important.
Having three women on this film composing was incredible. Yes. And that's what Meredith did want as well, trying to involve women because it just because of the subject matter. And that's, I think it worked out well.
Okay.
Actually, I was lucky when I first started out, there were no women composers in film, which is probably why I hadn't even flagged it as something I wanted to do. But about sort of 6 months into it, I did stumble into a group online, and that's how I met Sandrine and Luna. And there were about 7 of us, and we composed probably about 20 films together, 7 women, in a time when I had never heard a woman do any action composing at all. It was about 2018, 2019.
Mhm.
And there was pretty much no one there. So, yeah, I felt like I was riding on a wave of an influx of women composers, which is really special to be a part of.
Absolutely. Look, Jacquie, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We've been speaking to Jacquie Joy, who's the composer, music composer for the film Scars Unseen, which is screening as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. Jacquie, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, you too. Thank you. It's on
Okay.
Wednesday, the 16th as well. Okay.
Excellent to
Thank
hear.
you.
All the best. Bye bye.
Bye.